I don't know why you think that you could help me when you couldn't get by yourself. And I don't know who would ever wanna tell the seam of someone's dream. Baby, it's fine. You said that we should just be friends while I can.
Hola, ¿qué tal, compañeros? Bueno, ya comenzaré con la transmisión. 25 minutos a partir de ahora. 36 ya. Continuaré con anatomía de la pelvis y luego avanzaremos anatomía de la pared. ¿De acuerdo? De la pared abdominal. Pero puntos básicos nada, porque son muchos videos. Muchos videos son. Ya. Empezaremos con este. Presten atención. Si es que están en línea, ya pues comenten algo. Si es que no, ya pues igual comenten después.
In this lecture, we're going to look at the female reproductive organs. So we're going to look at numerous structures within the female pelvis and include the vagina, its position and relations to other structures within the pelvis. And we'll also look at the structure of the vagina itself. We'll look at the uterus, again look at its structure, the variations in position the uterus can assume, and also its peritoneal relations in association with the broad ligament. And then we'll look at the uterine tubes and the ovaries, their parts, and again the relationship they have with the peritoneum. So the female reproductive organs consist of the uterus, the vagina, uterine tubes, and the ovaries. And together they receive the sperm from the male and they permit fertilization. And then they facilitate the development of the embryo and the fetus. So here we have that hemisectored view once again of the female pelvis. So we can just orientate ourselves and see some of these structures. And we can see that here we have the anterior aspect of the pelvis and here's the posterior aspect. In the midline we've got the pubic symphysis, and as we spoke about in the male lecture, in the previous lecture, directly posterior to the pubic symphysis we have the bladder, which we can see here, and then we have the urethra leading from the bladder to the external environment. Now sitting directly posterior to the bladder and to the urethra we have the vagina, this muscular fibrous tube that connects the uterus to the outside world, and then sitting on the superior surface of the bladder we find we have the uterus, which we can see here, and then posterior to the vagina we can make out the rectum, most posteriorly sitting against the sacrum, which we can see here. So we can see we have the bladder most anteriorly in the female pelvis, we have the vagina and the uterus, and then most posteriorly we have the rectum. We can see radiating away from the uterus, from its lateral surface, we have a few structures which we'll cover in more detail. Here we can see the uterine tubes connected to the ovary, and here we can also see the round ligament of the uterus, and this is similar to the vas deferens in that it passes through the inguinal canal, and we'll look at that later on. I also just want to remind you of the relationship these organs have with the peritoneum and the two pouches that they form, the two peritoneal pouches. So if you remember, we have our layer of parietal peritoneum on the anterior abdominal wall, and this is going to course over the superior surface of the bladder here, and then it can turn back over the top of the bladder to then create a second pouch as it dips down and then runs up over the anterior surface of the rectum. So we find we have two pouches. We have a pouch here, and we have a pouch more posteriorly between the uterus and the rectum. And as I mentioned previously, these two pouches are the resico-uterine pouch between the bladder and the uterus, so the resico-uterine pouch here, and then behind the and then behind the uterus and the rectum, we find we have the recto-uterine pouch, which is here. We can see that peritoneum pouch formed posterior to the uterus. So let's carry on looking at the general disposition of the pelvis. And this time we're looking a kind of superior view down into the pelvis, with the parts of the gastrointestinal tract being removed, so the small intestines which may drape into the pelvis have been removed. We can see most posteriorly here we have the rectum, so here we find this space will be our recto-uterine pouch, and then we have the uterus, and then most anteriorly, with the pubic symphysis being deep down in here, we find we have the bladder, and here we have the resico-uterine pouch. So we can see in this view we have these two pouches sitting either side of the uterus, sitting anterior and posterior to the uterus. We can now in this view again clearly see the uterine tubes radiating away from the lateral aspect, and these are then in contact with the ovaries, which we can see in this position. Once again, we can see destined for the anterior abdominal wall, we have the round ligament of the uterus. So this view is as if we've taken the small intestines, which have draped down into the pelvis, away, and we're looking onto the superior surface of these pelvic organs. In this diagram, on the right-hand side, we can see that we have the bladder here, and this is being displaced. So this is an anterior view, and the bladder has been displaced to highlight the position of the ureters in relation to the uterine tubes. And we can see with our kidney up here, the ureter passes inferior to these structures. So the ureter is passing inferior. We can pick the ureter up here in this cartoon. The ureter is passing inferior to the uterine tube, to the various ligaments which will come across. And this is an important consideration to remember. Remember, in the male, the ureter passed inferior to the vas deferens too. So a similar arrangement here for the female. If we then start by looking at the vagina, then the vagina, which we can see as this muscular tube here, opens up into the vestibule, which is this space here. And we can see the vagina is then continuous up with the uterus at the region known as the cervix here. The general boundaries of the uterus are that anteriorly we find we have the fundus and we have the urethra associated with the bladder. Posteriorly we find we have the rectum, which we can see here. So we've got the vagina, just this musculo-membranous, this musculo-fibrous tube, which we can see in between these two structures. Laterally, as we'll come to appreciate later in this lecture and in subsequent lectures, we have the pelvic floor, specifically levator ani. The vagina has a number of roles. It receives the penis and ejaculate during sexual intercourse. It forms part of the birth canal when a baby is being delivered. And it also allows menstrual fluid to leave from the walls of the uterus. So the vagina is a really important structure associated with the female reproductive system.
Ahora las preguntas. ¿No hay preguntas? A ver. A ver. ¿Qué órgano reproductor femenino se coloca directamente posterior a la vejiga? La vagina, pues. Ya. A ver, delante de la vagina tenemos dos estructuras. La vejiga y la uretra. Siguiente. ¿Cuál de los fornices vaginales se coloca anterior al recto? Ya por el posterior, el fornix posterior, que conecta con el fondo de saco de Douglas o recto uterino. ¿Recuerdan? Ya. ¿Cuál de los siguientes espacios están entre la vejiga y el útero? Vejiga y útero. Bolsa vesicouterina. ¿Cuál de los siguientes ligamentos pasa a través del canal inguinal y está conectado con la pared abdominal anterior? En la diapo está. Es el ligamento redondo. Recuerden, este ligamento redondo es como el conducto deferente o el vas deferens en el varón. Conecta una parte del útero con la piel del labio mayor, si no me equivoco. ¿Ya? Recuérdense eso. A ver, otra cosa que quería que recuerden. Aquí está, no me recuerdo. A ver. No se nota aquí bien. Sí, no se nota. A ver, pero ¿para qué nos servían? Útero. Entre útero y vejiga. Fondo vesicouterino. Entre el recto y el útero, fondo recto uterino o de Douglas. Por aquí se entra, por el medio del fornix posterior se entra al fondo del saco de Douglas. ¿Ya? ¿Qué más? A ver. Recuerden que el uréter pasa inferiormente al tubo uterino, al ligamento del ovario y al ligamento redondo del útero. ¿De acuerdo? Traten de no olvidar eso. ¿Qué más? Eso nomás. Ya, siguiente video.
If we carry on looking at the vagina, then deep within the vagina, as it's approaching the cervix, we find a region known as the fornix. And that's this region here, which essentially is a gutter-like structure, a gutter-like ring that surrounds the cervix, which is protruding into the vault of the vagina, protruding into the actual cavity of the vagina. And here we can see in this diagram, we have what's known as an external os, and that is a small opening which we can see here as well. The opening that is continuous with the cavity of the uterus and the vagina. And we can see the cervix, this region here, is actually pushing into the vagina, this region just here. And as it pushes in, it leaves a gutter that surrounds the cervix. And this gutter, which we can appreciate is round here, here we have the wall of the vagina, here and here, is known as the fornix. And we can recognise four parts to our fornix. We can have an anterior portion, a posterior portion, and two lateral portions. So this is the anterior aspect of the fornix, this is the posterior aspect, and around the sides of the cervix we would find the more lateral. So deep within here we'd find the lateral aspect of the fornix. But this is a continuous gutter, much like a moat that surrounds a castle. We've mentioned previously that the posterior fornix is the deepest of these fornices, and it's important because it's closely related to the recto-uterine pouch. And I mentioned previously that the recto-uterine pouch, this peritoneal pouch here, is deep and free fluid and pus can collect in this region. Access to this pouch is best served by passing through the vagina and through the posterior fornix. And we can see it passing through in this direction. So a transvaginal approach through the vagina, through the posterior fornix to drain free fluid or pus from the recto-uterine pouch.
Había algo que quería comentarles aquí.
If we carry on looking at the vagina, then
Ya, está bien. Aquí en una mujer nulípara, este es como un redondito bien bonito. En una mujer multípara, esto es más aplanadito, en la cual se puede describir que hay un labio anterior y un labio posterior. Bueno, eso no me quería comentar por aquí. Ahora preguntas, a ver. Con respecto a la bolsa recto-uterina, ¿cuál de los siguientes es incorrecto? Tiene recto posicionado posteriormente. Sí. Se localiza en la pelvis femenina. Bien. Se accede mejor a través del fornix anterior. Error. Es un sitio donde se puede acumular líquidos libre. Sí. Incluso pues ya tenemos el error. La acumulación de líquido en la bolsa recto-uterina se puede drenar al pasar por cuál de las siguientes estructuras. Por el fornix posterior de la vagina. ¿Ya? Listo. Ya está. Siguiente.
So now let's move on to the uterus, and specifically the broad ligament. Now the broad ligament
Ligamento ancho.
is essentially a peritoneal ligament. And because it's a peritoneal ligament, it has those two layers. And it's a consequence of the peritoneum draping down over the pelvic organs. Now the uterus projects from within the pelvis. It can actually project slightly into the greater pelvis. And as the peritoneum is draping down, it covers both the anterior and the posterior surface of the uterus. So we can see we'll have peritoneum running down what is this posterior surface of the uterus. This is a posterior view. So we'll have peritoneum running down on this side, and we'll also have peritoneum running down on the more anterior side. So where the lateral margin of the uterus finishes, so where the lateral margin of the uterus finishes here and here, the peritoneum laterally comes together to form this sheet. The peritoneum comes together to form this sheet. And it's this double layer of peritoneum either side of the uterus that is the broad ligament. It is draping down from these structures. This is your uterine tube here and your uterine tube here.
Yeah.
It is hanging down from this uterine tube. So that if I was the broad ligament, if I personally was the uterus, and my arms could be the uterine tubes, then if a sheet was put over me, then it'd lay down my anterior and posterior parts of my uterus, but it also draped down like a tablecloth from the uterine tube. And then as it's draping down, these two layers are pushed together. And these two layers together, which we can see here and here, is the broad ligament. This peritoneal ligament that helps to stabilize the uterus. The uterus itself is a hollow organ. It has thick walls, and it's found mostly in the lesser pelvis. The fundus can sometimes creep up into the greater pelvis. So we can see it has a nice body here. It can has a neck which is continuous with the cervix, and that's and that forms a connection with the vagina. And we can see this fundus at the top here, and then projecting away laterally we have the uterine tubes. As I've mentioned, the body lays between two layers of peritoneum, and laterally they unite to form the broad ligament.
The broad ligament itself can be divided into three specific ligaments called the mesovarium, the mesosalpinx, and the mesometrium, and you can see these on the diagram. So what are you looking at? You can see the uterus here and the fundus here. Here you can see the uterine tubes and the portion of the uterine tube that is covered by peritoneum. So uterine tube covered by the peritoneum, that piece of peritoneum is called the mesosalpinx. So this sheet, which we can see running here, this is the mesosalpinx, and this specific part of the broad ligament that covers the uterine tube.
Ya.
There is also a portion of the broad ligament that covers the ovary, which you can see here, and this is known as the mesovarium. So this region that covers the ovary attached to the posterior surface of the broad ligament is viewed on its posterior surface, is known as the mesovarium. The remainder of the broad ligament, so this region around here, is known as the mesometrium. So within the broad ligament, there are three divisions, three parts. The part associated with the uterine tube is the mesosalpinx. The part associated with the ovary is the mesovarium. And the portion that is associated with the rest of the broad ligament is the mesometrium.
Ya, un rato. Antes que me olvide. Ya, el ovario tiene tres ligamentos. El mesovario, el ligamento ovárico del útero y el ligamento suspensorio del ovario. Recuerden muy bien esto, que por el ligamento suspensorio del ovario pasa la arteria y vena ovárica. Ahora, aquí abajito tenemos el ligamento cardinal o ligamento de McEnroe o ligamento cervical transverso. Por este ligamento pasan los vasos uterinos, arteria y vena. ¿De acuerdo? ¿Qué más? Ya, eso nomás. Recuerden eso.
So, three parts.
The broad ligament passes over the ovarian vessels as the suspensory ligament. So if we follow from the ovary here, we can see we have some ovarian blood vessels. Remember the ovarian arteries coming from the aorta. The ovarian veins drain into either the left venal vein or they drain into the IVC. And these blood vessels are suspended themselves within a ligament. And that ligament, an extension of the broad ligament laterally, is known as the suspensory ligament. We also have some other thickenings within the broad ligament that connect various structures. And between the lateral wall of the uterus and the ovary, we find we have the ligament of the ovary. So here we've got the uterus, here we've got the ovary. Running between the ovary and the uterus, we have the ovarian ligament, which we can see here. The ovarian ligament, or the ligament of the ovary. We also have that portion of the broad ligament that contains a specific thickening, which is the part that passes to the inguinal canal, and that's known as the round ligament of the uterus. The round ligament of the uterus follows a similar path as that to the vas deferens in the male, and it passes laterally and then forwards, heading towards the deep inguinal ring. It's a consequence of embryological development, and it follows, like I said, a similar path to the testes and heads towards the deep inguinal ring, and that is the round ligament of the uterus.
Ya. A ver, antes de que continuemos. Dentro del ligamento ancho, el ligamento ancho tiene contenido dos ligamentos. ¿Cuáles son? Bien, recuerden un poco. A ver, les voy a poner éxito. Ahí. Tiene dos ligamentos encerrados, cubiertos por el ligamento ancho. Recuerden, el ligamento del ovario y el ligamento redondo. Esos dos tienen dentro del ligamento ancho. ¿Ya? Ahora preguntas. La extensión del ligamento ancho sobre los vasos ováricos se conoce como... ¿Cuál de los siguientes? Recuerden, vasos ováricos. Hemos hablado de que el ovario tiene tres ligamentos. Un ligamento que lo conecta con el útero, ligamento ovárico del útero. Tiene un ligamento que se conecta que es parte del ligamento ancho, es el mesovario, y un ligamento por el cual pasan los vasos ováricos, y esto es el ligamento suspensorio. ¿Ya? Sí. Ahora, mesosalpinx es la parte del peritoneo que cubre cuál de las siguientes estructuras. Fácil, las trompas de falopio. Ya. ¿Cuál de los siguientes es un engrosamiento del ligamento ancho? Engrosamiento del ligamento ancho que pasa a través del canal inguinal. Ahí está, canal inguinal en las mujeres. En el varón, ¿qué estructura pasa por el canal inguinal? El vas deferens o conducto de frente. Y en la mujer eso es conocido como el ligamento redondo del útero. Bueno, es algo parecido. ¿Ya? Eso es todo. A ver, ya es 10:35. Ya ha pasado 25 minutos. Así que nos tomaremos un pequeño descanso. Disfruten la música.
Detente a escuchar la mejor mezcla de pop y reggaetón en Pop con Flow.
No juegues con mi mente.
Aquí en Spotify.
Ahora quiero más de ti. De ti, de ti.
Haz clic ahora y llévate la fiesta a donde quieras.
Baby, yo estoy ready para la vuelta. Todas tus amiguitas hablan mucho. Tengo bolsecito para la venta.
It's a game of give and take. You can't hurry.
Ok. Ya estamos de vuelta. Ahora tocaremos el tema de... Ya me olvidé. Ah, tubos uterinos. Ya.
So let's have a look in a bit more detail at the uterus and the uterine tubes. We can see in this diagram the uterus has been opened up and the uterine tubes and the ovaries have been opened to see their internal structure. If we look at the uterus, then we can see there's 3 layers to the uterus. We have the perimetrium, we have the myometrium, and the endometrium.
Tres capas. Yeah.
The perimetrium is this peritoneal layer, the serous layer on the outside of the uterus. That's the layer that you'd touch if you were to press on the uterus. You then have the myometrium, which is this muscular wall. That's really in the middle of the uterus, this muscular wall made up of smooth muscle. And then we have the inner mucosal layer, and that's the endometrium. And this is the layer that typically sheds during the menstrual cycle. So we have those 3 layers of the uterus.
Ya. Un dato interesante es que las células del miometrio, lo normal, menciona que miden 50 micras, pero durante el embarazo esto puede incrementarse hasta 10 veces, o sea, medir hasta 500 micras. Ya, un datito interesante nada más.
If we look at the uterine tubes, then the uterine tubes connect the ovaries. When we have a pair of ovaries, left one, a right one, and the uterine tubes connect these ovaries to the uterine cavity. And we have 4 parts to the uterine tubes. We have an infundibulum.
Yeah.
The infundibulum is the most lateral extension of the uterine tubes. And these contain finger-like projections called ovarian fimbriae. Here we see the infundibulum, and these ovarian fimbriae come close. They don't physically attach to the ovary, but they come very close to the ovary, and one finger may, in fact, attach to the ovary. But the rest of the fimbriae are kind of surrounding the ovary, and these collect the ovum once it's been dispelled from the ovary. Once the ovum has been dispelled and passes into the fimbriae, it then passes down the ampulla. The ampulla is the widest part of the uterine tube, and this is usually where fertilization occurs. And then the fertilized gametes then will pass down through the uterine tube through a region called the isthmus, and then we have a uterine part that is actually a part of the uterine tube that's embedded within the uterus itself. So we have various parts of our uterine tube. We have this nice dilated infundibulum and the various fimbriae. We then have an ampulla, we have an isthmus, and then we have a uterine part.
Ya, la parte uterina, justo la abertura que abre, que se abre en la cavidad uterina, tiene un nombrecito. Se llama ostium uterino. Eso nada más. ¿Qué más tiene?
This is it enters into the uterus and one runs within the wall of the uterus. The uterus can assume different positions, and the
¿Alguien podría comentar cuáles serán estos ángulos? En anteversión y anteflexión. Estaba en sus diapos del doctor. Ahorita, no tengo ni uno de sus diapos, creo. No he agarrado hasta ahorita ni uno. Ya otro día repasaré de sus diapos. Pero está en sus diapos. Si es que alguien puede comentarlo, muchas gracias. A ver, continuemos.
normal position is what's known as anteverted and anteflexed. It assumes this kind of orientation. But you can have a whole series of different orientations based on the angle that the cervix takes at the vagina. So this angle here, and this can be defined as being either anteverted or retroverted. So here we have what you'd consider to be an anteverted cervix, because the cervix are pointing slightly anteriorly. If this was to turn more in this direction, you'd have a retroverted cervix in relation to the vagina. You can remember in relation to the vagina being V, and it's verted if it's an anteverted or a retroverted cervix. Whether a uterus is antiflexed or retroflexed determines on the position of the fundus. And here we can see the direction that fundus is pointing, whether it's pointing quite anteriorly, like here, where you'd say you have an anti-flexed uterus, or whether it's more retroflexed, which we can see in this direction, where the uterus is more retroflexed. Now this has important considerations, the position of the uterus. It usually positions like this, and it can press on the rest on the top of the bladder. If it's slightly more anti-flexed, it can press on the bladder and mean the lady has to go to the toilet more often to carry out micturition on a more regular basis, as the bladder can't fill to what it's expected to. And if it's more retroflexed, then you can see there's the potential for a uterine prolapse. With increases in intra-abdominal pressure, then that's going to push down on these pelvic organs. And usually the uterus would be pushed against the bladder here. But if it's assuming this more retroflexed and maybe retroverted position, then you can see there's the potential for increases in pressure to just push the uterus down through the vagina, and you could have a uterine prolapse, being a insignificant, being a small prolapse as the cervix pushes more into the vagina, or being a full prolapse when the cervix may well protrude out of the vaginal opening. So the position of the uterus can be quite variable, and it can have significant consequences.
Ya, antes que termine, ¿alguien se recuerda de... El doctor estaba hablando de que hay por ecografía se puede determinar el prolapso? ¿Alguien se recuerda cómo era ese método? Si es que se recuerdan, ya pues lo comentan, porfis, ya. Algo que, bueno, se me acaba de ocurrir es cómo entra el DIU, el dispositivo intrauterino. Miren el ángulo, es anteflexado y anteversado. Hasta donde yo recuerdo, el palito para poner el DIU es rectito, no se dobla. Como supongo que el útero es flexible, por eso, ¿no? Oye, no sé, ya me perdí. ¿Cómo hace eso? Mire. Se dobla mucho. Bueno, ya. No más. Ya ves. Pausa. Preguntas. ¿En cuál de los siguientes sitios ocurre la fertilización? Fácil. Ampolla. ¿Dónde está ampolla? Ampolla, ¿verdad? Tercio externo con 2 tercios internos. Ya. ¿Cuál de las siguientes es la posición más común del útero? Sencillo. Anteversado y anteflexado. ¿Dónde saber? Bueno, antevertido y anteflexado. Ya. El prolapso uterino es más común con cuál de las siguientes posiciones del útero. Ya lo dijo en el video. Retrovertido y retroflexado. Sí. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? Ya no hay nada aquí. Siguiente video. Antes que me olvide, las medidas del útero, ¿se recuerdan? ¿Se recuerdan? ¿Verdad que sí? A ver, el útero. A ver. Era... ¿Cuánto era esto? Ya bueno. En la infancia es 2 tercios... ¿Cómo era esto? Ya estoy recordando. Ya a ver. Se mide el cervix y el resto del cuerpo, si no me equivoco. Ya. menciona que el cervix, la relación cervix y cuerpo y fondo en la infancia es 1/3 y 2/3 del cervix. En mujeres jóvenes, bueno, lo que decía es algo como virgen o algo así, mujeres vírgenes, era un medio, o sea, la mitad de todo el útero era el cervix y la otra mitad era el cuerpo y el fondo. Ahora en las mujeres adultas se invierte a lo que era cuando era pequeña, cuando era infante. Es 2/3 el cuerpo y el fondo y 1/3 es el cervix. En total, muy bien, Kelicita, es 7.5 desde la abertura externa del cervix hasta el fondo, 7.5. Como dije, son 2/3 para el cuerpo y el fondo, o sea, 5 centímetros, y 1/3 para el cervix, 2.5. Ahora menciona que cuando se hace, ¿cómo se llama esta cosita? Cuando se mide, esto de aquí mide 6 centímetros. Ahora, el grosor del fondo del útero, de la capa muscular, ¿cómo llamo esto? Pero esto mide 1.5. Lo normal es que en estas paredes de aquí mida 1,2, el grosor de la pared. ¿Ya? ¿Qué más quería comentarles? Ya, eso nada más. Siguiente tema, ovarios. Ovarian.
So if we look at the ovaries, then we can see, as we've mentioned before, we have a pair of ovaries. And these are really positioned posteriorly against the broad ligament. So they're positioned posterior to the uterus. We can see the uterus here and the rectum. And here we can see the ovaries. They're pushed up against the lateral pelvic wall. And a tumour or an enlargement of the ovary, a cyst associated with the ovary, can press on the nerves that run along the lateral pelvic wall, specifically the obturator nerve, and that can lead to radiating pain in the groin region. But these ovaries are almond-shaped gonads located alongside the lateral wall of the pelvis. As I mentioned previously, they're suspended within the broad ligament by the mesovarium, and they're attached to the lateral wall by the suspensory ligament, and these contain the ovarian vessels. They're also attached to the uterus by the ligaments of the ovary, or an ovarian ligament. And as I've mentioned, at ovulation, a oocyte or an ovum is expelled into the peritoneal cavity. Yeah. The peritoneal cavity is not actually sealed around the ovary. There is an opening that allows the ovum to pass into the fimbriae, the infundibulum to receive the ovum, and then passes it to the ampulla for fertilization.
Ya está. Algo más para agregar aquí. Solo quiero que recuerden que si es que encontramos tumores en el ovario, estos pueden apretar la pared pélvica lateral, presionando el nervio obturador, y esto puede provocar un dolor irradiado hacia la región de la ingle. ¿De acuerdo? A ver, antes que me olvide, ¿cuáles son las dimensiones del ovario? 3, 1.5 y 1. ¿Ya? ¿Cuáles son los ligamentos que tiene el ovario? Son 3. Recuerda, mesovario, ligamento ovárico y ligamento suspensorio. ¿Por cuál de estos 3 pasa los vasos ováricos? Por el ligamento suspensorio. ¿Cuál de estos 3 ligamentos está contenido en el ligamento ancho? El ligamento ovárico. ¿Cuál de estos 3 es parte del ligamento ancho? El mesovario. ¿Ya? A ver, ¿cuál de los siguientes contiene específicamente los tubos uterinos? Mesosalpinx. A ver. Mesenterio, mesovario. Está bien, claro. Sí. Siguiente temita. Conclusión. ¿A qué conclusión llega? ¿Ves?
So in conclusion, we've looked at the female reproductive organs, we've looked at the vagina, its position and relationship with other organs in the lesser pelvis. We've looked at its muscular membranous tube, and we looked at the fornix, creating this gutter around the cervix. For the uterus, we looked at the cervix briefly and the body and its fundus. We looked at the three layers that make up the uterus, perimetrium, myometrium and the endometrium. And then we looked at the peritoneal pouches, broad and other associated ligaments. And then towards the end, we looked at the uterine tubes and the ovaries, the various parts of the uterine tubes, and also their position within the pelvis in relation to the ovaries.
Perfecto. No tiene preguntas, creo esto. Sí, no hay preguntas. ¿Qué más? ¿Qué más? ¿Qué más? A ver, ¿tenemos tiempo? Sí, tenemos tiempo. Oh, arteria ilíaca, sus ramas. Ya, esto está interesante. A ver.
In this lecture, we're going to look at the branches of the internal iliac artery. We're going to look at the branches that come off this internal iliac artery, which is a branch itself from the common iliac. We'll look at some of the divisions, the anterior and posterior divisions, and we'll look at the visceral and parietal branches that supply the organs within the pelvis and also the body wall, the walls of the pelvis. We'll look at some specific organs, so we'll look at the male reproductive organs, include the testes. We'll look at the female reproductive organs like the uterus and the vagina and the specific branches that supply them. And then at the end, we'll look at the rectum, which has a complicated blood supply, and we'll start looking at the blood supply to it with the upper, middle and lower parts. But important, remember that the rectum also with the anus runs in the perineum, and we'll look at that later on in the course. So the main arterial supply to the pelvic viscera is primarily from the internal iliac artery. And this artery gives rise to a complex and incredibly variable network of arteries that supply organs within the urinary, reproductive and gastrointestinal systems, those systems that are located in the pelvis. So if we look at the general arrangement of the branches of the internal iliac, then on the screen we can see a hemisected pelvis which has had the organs removed. So we're just looking into a right hemisected pelvis. You should be familiar with this view now. Here we have the posterior aspect, here we have the anterior aspect. We can see we've got the sacrum, we've got the fifth lumbar vertebra here, we've got the pubic symphysis. But the bladder, the rectum, the uterus, the vagina have all been removed. And what you should be able to remember is that running down through the abdomen was the abdominal aorta, giving rise to those unpaired visceral branches that supplied the foregut, midgut and hindgut, the celiac trunk, superior mesenteric artery and inferior mesenteric artery. And then as it entered into the pelvis, the aorta, which we can see here, bifurcated into two. It bifurcated into the left, which we can see here that's been cut, and the right common iliac artery. And this occurred at around about the level of the fourth lumbar vertebrae, so about here. If we now just follow the right common iliac, which we can see running down here, we see the right common iliac itself divides into two. It divides into an external iliac and an internal iliac. Now we'll concentrate on the internal iliac, but it's just worth remembering that the external iliac passing down in this direction will go on to form the femoral artery and supply the lower limb, but also coming up from the external iliac artery, we have the inferior epigastric artery. And remember, the inferior epigastric artery was important in providing arterial blood to the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall. It would go on to anastomose with the superior epigastric artery, which was a branch from the internal thoracic artery in the chest. So try to remember that formation of that collateral circulation. But let's just concentrate on the internal iliac artery. So here we can see the internal iliac that's passing down over the pelvic brim into the pelvis. And what we can see is that we have a whole series of branches. And in the cadaver, these branching patterns are incredibly variable. But they do tend to divide themselves into what's known as an anterior division and a posterior division.
Ya. Preguntas. La bifurcación de la aorta ocurre ¿a cuál del nivel vertebral? L4. L4, ¿verdad? La aorta se divide en derecha e izquierda. A nivel de L4. Un poco más abajo ya empieza a dividirse en ilíaca interna e ilíaca externa. ¿O recuerdo mal? Ay, no. ¿Soy yo o el internet está lento? No. Internet, por favor. Internet. La bifurcación de la Corán. Ya. L4. Ya, está bien. ¿Cuál de las siguientes arterias es una rama de la arteria epigástrica superior? Arteria epigástrica superior. ¿Cuál de las siguientes arterias es una rama de la arteria epigástrica superior? ¿Cómo? Torácica será, pues. Auxilio. Ah, sí, está bien. Arteria torácica interna. Ah, cierto, la arteria ilíaca interna, también llamada como arteria hipogástrica. Muy bien. ¿Cuál de las siguientes arterias no suministra sangre a la pared abdominal anterior? Epigástrica inferior, sí. Epigástrica superior, sí. Mesentérica, no creo. Circunflejas profundas. Superficiales. ¿Mesentérica? ¿Qué tiene que ver el intestino con la pared abdominal? No sé. Ah, está bien. A las circunflejas. Ya. Con respecto a la pared anterior. Ya, interesante. ¿Cuál de las siguientes arterias es una rama de la arteria epigástrica superior? Arteria epigástrica superior. Esto hemos visto, creo. La torácica interna. Ya. ¿Cuál de las siguientes arterias no suministra sangre a la pared abdominal anterior? Esto hemos visto. Mesentérica. Ah, son las preguntas que respondí con esta carita triste porque no me recordaba. Listo. Cancelar. Aquí hay un artículo. Ramas de la arteria ilíaca. ¿Miramos? A ver, lo dejaré cargando. A ver, vamos a ver qué cosa hay aquí. No se ve muy bien, creo, sí. Sí, no se ve mucho. Vamos a retocar otro. Igual. A ver, ¿qué dice el pequeño artículo? Ramas de la arteria ilíaca. ¿Qué es esto? Oh, embriología de la arteria ilíaca interna. A ver, lo dejaré ahí para que ustedes, si es que quieren leerlo, lo ponen pausa al video una vez que termine. Ya, continuaré. Pongan pausa al video, no se olviden si quieren leer esto. Ah, cierto, sí es L4. Articulación sacroiliaca. Articulación sacroiliaca se divide en ilíaca externa e interna. Ya. Arteria ilíaca interna. Aquí que dice, en adultos, la arteria ilíaca interna es un vaso de 3 a 4 centímetros de grosor y es más pequeña que la arteria ilíaca externa. Oh, ya, ¿qué más? Relaciones. Puede ser. Clasificación de la arteria ilíaca. Uy. Algo quería comentarles aquí. Oh. Ya me olvidé. Clasificación de la arteria ilíaca interna. Clasificación. ¿No es anterior y posterior? Ah, interesante. Según tamaño, curso, terminal. Oye, estas cositas no sabía. Clasificación Adachi, ¿qué es esto? Ah. Eso tengo que revisar más luego. Ramas de la arteria ilíaca interna. Ya, son, ahí está. División anterior y una división posterior. Ya, viscerales y parietales, ya. La anterior emite 8 ramas. No me recuerdo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 ramas. Y la posterior 3 ramitas. Ya, bueno, la posterior sí. Iliolumbar, sacrolateral y glútea superior. La anterior 8 ramas. No lo recuerdo. Ah, aquí está. Jeje. División anterior. Ah, cierto, el umbilical, el obturador, vesical o vaginal inferior. Vesical es en el varón, en la mujer es vaginal inferior. Uterino, del cual, sí, del uterino también hay una rama vaginal para apoyar a la circulación de la vagina. La pudende interna, ya, rectal medio y glúteo inferior. Ya, hay una rectal inferior que es rama de la pudende interna. ¿Qué más? ¿Dónde está la arteria uterina? Ah, la axapa. La posterior iliolumbar, sacrolateral, el glúteo superior. Ya, chévere. Órganos reproductores masculinos. Oye, es harto para leer esta cosita. El recto. Uy. Creo que van a volver a ver el video y pausar esto muchas veces. Relevancia clínica. Empulización pélvica. Ya recuerdo un poco de esto. La arteria uterina pasa por encima o por encima del uréter. Sí, y cuando queremos hacer una histerectomía tenemos que clamparlo justo a este nivel. Ahora, para que nunca se olviden de que la arteria uterina pasa por encima del uréter, recuérdense la frase: el agua fluye por debajo del puente. En este caso, el puente sería la arteria uterina y el agua fluye sería el uréter. Bueno, memotecnias que a veces dicta el lecturer. Ya, siguiente temita. Ya es 11:09, ya pasó 25 minutos. Rápido pasa el tiempo. Recuerden, solo hay que avanzar 25 minutos y luego su pausa. Ahora, lo único que quiero decirles es que disfruten la música. Jeje.
So dysfunctional. I really shouldn't miss you, but I can't let you go.
The legend of the phoenix all ends with beginnings. What keeps the planet spinning? The force from the beginning. Love. We've come too far to give up who we are. So let's raise the bar and our cups to the stars. She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. 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 The present has no ribbon. Your gift keeps on giving. What is this I'm feeling? If you wanna leave, I'm with it. We've come too far to give up who we are. So let's raise the bar and our cups to the stars. She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. 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 We're up all night to get. 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 We're up all night to get lucky. 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 night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. 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 We're up all night to get lucky.
Ok, continuaremos. Ahí lo he cerrado el este. Otro te tengo que cubrir. Nos hemos quedado en ramas, ¿verdad? De la arte ilíaca. ¿Dónde está ramas? Toda esta parte estamos salteando. Sí, porque son hartas cositas. Ya, este hemos visto. Ramas de la arteria ilíaca interna, introducción, ya hemos visto esto. Pero, mire, no le he puesto en el este. Al primer examen. Ya. Ahora miremos las diferencias entre hombres y mujeres de las ramas. Después continuamos con ramas ilíaca interna, las conclusiones. Y después continuamos con estas cositas aquí. Ya, continuamos. Diferencias.
Now let's move on to the individual branches in the male and the female that may be specific. Here in this diagram we can see we have the bladder, we can see we have the seminal vesicles, we can have the vas deferens. If we look at the vas deferens, we can see running along here, we can see running alongside it, we have the artery to the vas deferens. So this is specifically found in the male where we have a vas deferens. We can see we have superior vesical arteries supplying the superior aspect of the bladder, and we can also see that we have inferior vesical arteries that are coming down and supplying the base of the bladder and also giving prostatic branches to supply the prostate. So this is what we find in the male. Here in this diagram we can also see we've got the superior rectal arteries running down on the lateral surface, either side on the lateral surfaces of the rectum. We can also see in this example we have a middle rectal artery, and that's given rise just before the internal iliac dives out of the pelvis via the lesser sciatic foramen. I've included the testes here just to show the blood supply to the testes, but all I really wanted to mention is that we have the testicular artery. Remember, the testicular artery comes from the aorta. It doesn't come from the internal iliac artery. So we've got the testicular artery, which is going to supply the testes. But look, we can see here, we still have the artery to the vas deferens. Running along the vas deferens.
Algo que quería comentarles es que la arteria para el testículo y la arteria para el ovario provienen de la aorta, no vienen de la ilíaca interna. Como dijo en el video, la ilíaca interna sale por el foramen ciático menor. ¿Qué más? Dos cositas me quedan recalcarles.
Deferens, that's then going to go towards the epididymis. So we can see there's the potential here for some kind of collateral circulation between the two systems, branches from the internal iliac and branches from the abdominal aorta. So that's a general overview of the branches of the internal iliac within the male. If we look at the female, then I've mentioned a few of these arteries before. Again, we have the idea that we've got the ovary here, we've got the ovary here, and we can see that we have the ovarian artery. Remember, the ovarian artery is coming up from the aorta. It's not coming from the internal iliac artery. And then we look at the specific branches that supply the uterus and the vagina from the internal iliac. Remember, we have the uterine artery. Here we can see the uterine artery supplying the body of the uterus. It will run within the broad ligament and form a collateral circulation, anastomosis, with the ovarian arteries. So again, there's the potential for links between the internal iliac and the aorta. We can see that coming from the uterine artery, we have the vaginal branches, and these are supporting the vaginal artery. So here we can see the vaginal artery, this direct branch coming from the internal iliac. In the male, it's the inferior vesicle. In the female, it's the vaginal artery, and that's specifically going to supply the vagina. So here we can see the various branches in the female. Branches coming from the internal iliac, uterine artery, its vaginal branches, and the vaginal artery, and also branches coming from the aorta, where we have the ovarian artery. It's really important to remember that this uterine artery is positioned above the ureter. So if a lady was to have a hysterectomy, then when the uterus was removed, then you'd clamp off the uterine artery. If you didn't, and then you remove the uterus, you'd have bleeding out into the pelvis. So the relationship is that you've got the uterine artery, and coming down, you have the ureter that flows underneath this blood vessel. That's really important when you need to remove the uterus, that you clamp the uterine artery, and you can deal with it, you can ligate it, and you leave the ureter intact. How can you tell the difference between the ureter and the uterine artery? Well, the uterine artery will have this pulsatile contraction as the blood is passing through the uterine artery. And if you're the surgeon, you can just tap the ureter, and that will stimulate a wave of peristalsis that will go in both directions, a direction back up to the kidney and a direction down to the uterus. So remember that the water within the ureter flows under the bridge being the uterine artery. And that's an important consideration when looking at the blood supply to the female.
Yeah. Ay, ¿alguien se recuerda que hemos empezado? Esto es como 5 minutos. 3:17. Digamos con 20 ya. 20:45. Ya, 11:45. Vamos a descansar. ¿Qué más quería comentarles aquí? A ver. Ya. La arteria vaginal en la mujer es algo parecido a la arteria vesical inferior en el varón. ¿Qué más? Ahora, eso nada más. Sí. Ya. Siguiente video. Ay no, las preguntas.
So in this lecture, we've looked at the anterior and posterior.
Las preguntas. Carga, por favor, internet, no te me malogres. Estaba pensando que podríamos hacer una videollamada. Y mientras estamos escuchando bueno, en los momentos que vamos a discutir, podríamos activar el sonido de la videollamada. ¿Les parece? Y esto se va grabando. O sea, la conversación, los comentarios y el video. ¿Qué les parece? Pero tendríamos que organizarnos un poquito mejor. ¿Ya? Preguntas. A ver, el cirujano está realizando una histerectomía en una mujer de 50 años mientras liga la arteria uterina. ¿Será muy cauteloso para evitar daños a qué estructura? ¿Ureteres? Creo que sí, ureteres. Ya. ¿Qué arteria no es una rama de la arteria ilíaca interna? Ya. Todo lo que es arteria testicular, toda la arteria, bueno, las arterias que irrigan al testículo y al ovario no son ramas de la arteria ilíaca interna, son ramas de la aorta. Ya. A ver, recordemos un poco cuáles son las ramas de la... mejor no, en otro momento recordamos. Ya ver, pero vamos avanzando, si no el tiempo no se va a hacer bien largo. A ver, las conclusiones. ¿A qué conclusiones llegamos?
So in this lecture we've looked at the anterior and posterior divisions of the internal iliac and their parietal and visceral branches. And then we've looked at the specific branches to the male reproductive structures and to the female reproductive structures, like the uterine artery and its vaginal branch, and the vaginal artery that supplies the uterus and the vagina. We then finished by looking at the rectum and how it has quite a diverse blood supply to its upper, middle and lower parts, and then really led on to a future lecture, which is the inferior rectal arteries coming from the internal pudendal, which we'll come across again when we look at the perineum.
Ya. ¿Preguntas? No hay preguntas. Ya. Ahora... las conclusiones... Ya. Ahora vamos a hablar de las paredes pélvicas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Neurovasculatura. Bueno, sus conclusiones, y eso es todo. Esto se cerraré. Ok. Paredes pélvicas. Piso pélvico.
If we now move on to the actual walls of the pelvis, then we have a lateral wall, a posterior wall, and an anterior wall. But actually look at the orientation. If you look at the orientation of the pelvis, you can see that it's kind of running down in this direction. A lot of the weight which is coming down here is actually being borne on the pubic symphysis. It's not tilted square. It is actually tilted quite inferiorly. So the actual pelvis is tilted. So we have this passageway coming down through here, allowing the baby, when it's being born, to pass through the pelvis, and it takes this direction. If we look at the anterior wall of the pelvis, we can see it's made up of the pubic symphysis and the various pubic rami, superior and inferior pubic rami. We can see this is the anterior wall. The lateral wall over here, we can see, is made up of some important muscles and membrane. Importantly, we have this muscle. This muscle here we can see is running all the way over here. This is obturator internus muscle. Obturator internus. It lines the lateral wall of the pelvis, and it's within the obturator foramen. It's really important you remember that the obturator muscle, obturator internus muscle, is on the lateral wall of the pelvis. Its tendon passes out through here. Its tendon...
Creo que está mal traducido esto. Ya, bueno, dice que tiene que bajar por ahí. ¿Su tendón?
Actually goes to attach onto the femur, and it passes out of the pelvis via the lesser sciatic foramen. So remember that the tendon of obturator internus actually leaves the pelvis.
Ya, el tendón del obturador interno en realidad deja la pelvis por el foramen menor. ¿Esto qué músculo es? Isquiococcigio, coccigio, músculo coccigio. Este de aquí, ¿qué músculo es? ¿Qué es esto? Por el piriforme. Este de aquí, ¿qué músculo es? Obturador interno. Esta cosita blanca de aquí encima, ¿qué es? Fascia, tendón, ¿qué es esto? Ah, bueno, sí, tendón del obturador interno. Esta cosita de aquí, el engrosamiento, ¿qué cosa es esto? Ah, esto creo que era la inserción del piso pélvico. Sí, creo que sí. Ya, aquí tenemos un orificio. ¿Qué pasa por aquí? El van del obturador interno. Arteria, vena y nervio. ¿Qué más? A ver, miremos qué más dice.
What we can see lying on top of obturator internus muscle is this thin sheet, and this is obturator fascia. So we have the obturator foramen. Filling the obturator foramen is obturator internus, and then you have obturator fascia. And again, that's important, we'll come back to it. This forms the lateral wall of the pelvis. We can also see we've got this defect here, and that allows obturator artery, nerve and vein to leave the pelvis and pass into the medial compartment of the thigh. If we then look posteriorly, we find we have the sacrum most posteriorly, and we have some muscles radiating from the sacrum, from the coccyx down here, that form this posterior boundary. Posterolaterally, we can see we've got coccygeus muscle. You can see that muscle here. And then superior to coccygeus, we find we have piriformis. And piriformis is running out of the pelvis. And this also goes to attach to the femur, attaches the greater trochanter of the femur, and it's a lateral rotator of the thigh. But it originates from the anterior surface of the sacrum, and it passes out through the greater sciatic foramen. Remember that passing out of the greater sciatic foramen superior to it was the superior gluteal blood vessel, and passing out of the pelvis inferior to it was the inferior gluteal artery, and also the
ya, glúteo superior por aquí arriba, glúteo inferior por aquí abajo, junto con la pudenda interna. Ah, vasos, el van de la pudenda interna. Sí, creo que sí, pasan por aquí abajo. Vamos a ver qué dice.
The internal pudendal artery. What we have here, inferior to piriformis, is coccygeus.
Yeah.
Coccygeus is running from the coccyx to the ischial spine. It runs on the inside of the sacrospinous ligament. So when we look posteriorly at the ligaments of the pelvis, we can see the sacrospinous ligament. But lying on the inside of the sacrospinous ligament, we find we have coccygeus muscle. We find we have the coccygeus muscle here. Here, I've mentioned both piriformis and obturator internus exit the pelvis via the greater and lesser sciatic foramina, respectively, and that the obturator membrane has a thickening that runs from the superior.
¿Se está transmitiendo esta cosa? ¿O se ha vuelto lento? ¿Dónde está? No. ¿Qué ha pasado? Ahí sí está transmitiendo. Pensé que no estaba transmitiendo. Ya. Creo que debemos hacer estas cositas por las noches. A la 1, a las 2 de la mañana. Porque eso está libre el internet. A estas horas muchos jóvenes en Juliaca creo que están con sus videojuegos, están mirando películas, series, qué sé yo. Y el internet está súper lento. Bueno, si quieren nos podemos organizar en la noche, ¿eh? 12 de la noche, 1 de la mañana sería mejor, creo. Con videollamada y todo. Pero depende de lo que digan ustedes. Por mí creo que no hay problema.
Superior pubic ramus to the ischial spine. And this, as we move on to the pelvic floor, is really important. If we have, running along here, we see we have this thickening. This is an important thickening of the obturator fascia, obturator membrane, that's lying medial to obturator internus muscle. This thickening runs from the superior pubic ramus up here all the way to the ischial spine, and it forms an important attachment site for the pelvic floor muscles, which we're now going to talk about.
Ya. Preguntas. El músculo piriforme sale de la pelvis por medio de qué foramen? De piriforme, del ciático mayor. Sí, del ciático mayor. Por el ciático menor pasa el tendón del obturador interno. Ya. Sí, el internet se está poniendo más lento. Ya falta pocos videos, ya, pero ojalá que terminemos bien. Ya. ¿Qué estructuras pasan a través del foramen ciático menor? El tendón del obturador interno, justo acaba de decir. ¿Qué estructuras pasan cerca? No, por encima. Abajo, por encima del músculo piriforme. Uy. Este es glúteo superior. ¿Recuerdan? A ver, el músculo piriforme, por encima pasaba el glúteo superior, por debajo pasaba el glúteo inferior. ¿Y qué más pasaba? A ver, o me he equivocado. Sí, está bien. Ya, eso es todo por aquí. Siguiente temita. ¿Aún tenemos tiempo? Sí. Estructuras y componentes del piso pélvico. Se está poniendo más y más lento. Creo que voy a quitar este aquí, el modelo 3D. A ver.
So the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is a muscular floor. It forms the inferior boundary of the pelvis. It's made up of a series of thin, flat muscles. And if we look here, we can see that, similar to the last diagram, the organs, the blood vessels have been removed, and we've just got the musculature. And we can remind ourselves of some of these muscles. We have piriformis here.
Yeah. Piriform.
Have piriformis from the anterior surface of the sacrum, and that's going to pass out via the greater sciatic foramen. We also have coccygeus muscle here, sometimes known as ischio-coccygeus, because it's passing from the coccyx to the ischium. We can see that here. Coccygeus, running on the inside of the sacrospinous ligament. We then find we have obturator internus muscle. Here's obturator artery, nerve and vein passing through the obturator canal. And here we have that thickening running from the superior pubic rami to the ischial spine. We have that thickening of obturator membrane, and that is a tendinous arch. Running medially from this tendinous arch, we have our pelvic floor muscles. See them radiating from this tendinous arch laterally, running towards the midline. At the midline, they're going to be met by the pelvic floor muscles that have come from the opposite side. And they form this hammock from one tendinous arch on the left to one tendinous arch on the right. They form this hammock that fills the floor of the pelvis, running from the tendinous arch into the midline. We can see that in slightly more detail when we add in the specific muscles that form the pelvic floor. But this pelvic floor is, like I've said, a funnel-shaped pelvic diaphragm. Remember, the diaphragm separates the thorax from the abdomen. Now we have a pelvic diaphragm, again formed by a series of thin, flat muscles that's going to separate the pelvis above from the perineum below. So it's a partition. Just like with the diaphragm, it had apertures to allow the esophagus, the inferior vena cava, and the aorta to pass through. This pelvic diaphragm also has apertures that allow the anal canal, the urethra, and in the female, the vagina to pass through. We can see some of these here. So, the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor itself, this thin sheet of muscle originating from the tendinous arch, is made up of what we call levator ani and coccygeus muscle. We're familiar with coccygeus muscle. We can see that here. We then have a series of 3 muscles that form levator ani. We have puborectalis, we have pubococcygeus, and we have iliococcygeus. And these 3 muscles form the pelvic.
Puborectal, pubococcygio. No, este es el ilio. ¿Cómo es esto? Ya me perdí. Este debe ser pubococcys y este debe ser iliococcyx. Ay, no sé.
Floor, if coccygeus is added. So puborectalis, pubococcygeus, and iliococcygeus are levator ani. Levator ani plus coccygeus is the pelvic floor.
Ya. No hay preguntas. Ah, sí hay preguntas. ¿Cuál de los siguientes músculos no forma el diafragma pélvico? Recordemos un poco qué dijo. El diafragma pélvico está constituido por 2 músculos, el elevador del ano y el coccygio. Punto, eso es todo. Ya, aquí tenemos el coccygio, está bien. Ya. El elevador del ano está constituido por 3 músculos, los cuales son el pubo rectal, el pubococcygio y el iliococcygia. A ver, está bien, está bien, está bien, está bien. El único que no queda es el piriforme. A ver. Ya, está bien. 43. Uy, ya falta poco para 2 minutos. ¿Cuánto tiempo dura esto? Perineo. Perineo es harto, creo. 4 minutos. Ya, vamos a estirarnos un poquito más, creo. Ya, miremos.
In this lecture, we're going to look at the perineum and external genitalia. So look at the perineum, which is this shallow space inferior, or it can be considered to be superficial, to the pelvis and the pelvic floor. We're going to look at the boundaries and the divisions of the perineum, and specifically we'll look at what's called the ischio-anal fossa. We'll look at its boundaries within the perineum and also its contents. And then we'll go on to look at the perineal pouches, and these can be particularly complicated. The deep and the superficial perineal pouches, and some sex differences we find for the male and the female. Okay. And then we'll look at the neurovasculature of the perineum and return to the internal pudendal artery. So as I mentioned at the top, the perineum is a shallow space which is inferior or it can be considered superficial to the pelvis. It contains a number of important structures, including muscles and erectile tissues, and these are associated with reproduction. So, let's first of all just try and orientate ourselves as to where the perineum is located. Now here we can see we have hemisections through the male and the female pelvis. We can see we have male here, another male here, and a female. We have 3 sections through the pelvis. We have anterior here and posterior. Again, anterior, posterior, anterior, posterior. You should be familiar with these images by now. And what we can see is here the organs haven't actually been hemisected, although the bones of the pelvis have been hemisected. And on this side have been hemisected directly down the midline. Now, what we can do is just draw a simple line that separates the pelvis from the perineum. So if we go from the pubic symphysis all the way around up to the sacrum and the coccyx, everything above this line is the pelvis, everything below it is the perineum. We can do the same on these ones which have been hemisected through the organs. Pubic symphysis to the coccyx. We can see everything above it is in the pelvis, everything below it is in the perineum. So in the perineum here, we're including the penis. We're including muscles that guard the anal sphincter. In the female, we can do the same. We can see that the urethra passes through from the pelvis to the perineum, passing through the pelvic floor here. We can see the same applies for the vagina here, opens up into the vestibule. And we can see the same for the rectum, which is here. Here we're going to identify some muscles that guard the anal sphincter. So this just hopefully gives an introduction to where we're going to be investigating. An area which is superficial or inferior to the pelvic floor. Here is just a sentence which summarizes what we're going to do. It's this: investigate this shallow space, superficial, inferior to the pelvic cavity. And it's levator ani, these muscles that we've been indicating, which we looked at in the previous lecture. Levator ani is going to be the partition that forms the pelvic floor that separates the perineum from the pelvic cavity.
¿Soy yo o está lento? No hay preguntas, sí hay preguntas. Hay un artículo. Uy, ya estamos a contratiempo. Ya, las preguntas. ¿Qué estructura forma el límite posterior del perineo? Estructura que forma el límite posterior del perineo. Perineo. ¿El coxis? ¿O no? Límite posterior del perineo. Es como un rombito. Adelante está el arco púbico. No, la sínfisis púbica. Luego están los arcos inferiores del pubis. Luego a los cantos tenemos las tuberosidades isquiáticas. Luego atrás tenemos el coxis. Y entre la tuberosidad isquiática y el coxis tenemos el ligamento sacroisquiático, isquio. Ay, me olvidé el ligamento. Oh, ¿es en serio? Ya, Marta me recuerda. Ya, el coxis, ya. ¿Qué estructura está presente en el perineo? En el perineo. La vejiga está dentro, el útero está dentro, la próstata creo que está dentro. Ovario obviamente está dentro. La vagina en la mujer sí. Aquí falta la uretra. Ya. Sí. Eso es todo por el momento. Ahora disfruten de la música. ¿De acuerdo? Nos vemos dentro de un par de músicas.
My name, but everybody's changing and I don't feel the same. I'm
con una música más, por favor.
Yeah, perdonen, yo como fan disfruté. Vete veterano si eres otro hater de GT. No era canon ni cake, yo me quedaba en la TV. Goku Yup destrozando el palacio de Dende. Y otra vez Pilaf la tiene que joder. Goku se encogerá, pero no su poder. El presidente Trunks, la chica Psicoten. El carácter de Pan, que ya no es un bebé. Un dragón rojo y esferas con estrellas negras que no se convierten en piedras, siguen otras reglas. Están dispersas por la galaxia entera y si no regresan en un año la Tierra se desintegrará. El viaje empezará ni mega y no podrá salir sin pagar los impuestos. Impuestos por Donkey. Kiru se traga el radar, aunque lo va a asimilar. Ahora Goku va a empezar a disfrutar con Reddick. Pan no es una abeja, Trunks se viste de mujer. Tsunama no provoca terremotos a placer. Los hermanos Bon van a aparecer para hacerte bailar a su merced. Desde otro planeta sirven a un falso gurú y es el dios Lut el que convertirá Pan en muñeca. Tonta aquí se obcecan que obedece al Dr. Mu, que lo único que quiere es ver su creación completa. Golpe simultáneo desde dentro y desde fuera. Ahora hecho pedazos parece un robot cualquiera. Como Kiru traicionando junto al M2 comando. Pero Real está al mando y ahora tiene las esferas. Trunks es convertido en una plancha de metal. Parece un gran rival y controla el 100% del planeta en el que están. Pero Goku y Pan también son vencidos y serán teletransportados por él. Adoro a Bra, pero fan no te alborotes, que es por ella por lo que Vegeta se afeita el bigote. Baby ahora controla a Goten y aunque Son Gohan no note, no pretende hacerle daño, así impide que le derroten. Porque es un parásito que absorbe la energía de todos aquellos cuerpos a los que poseía. Los Sufurs ya no existían, murieron a sangre fría por los Saiyans de los que juró que se vengaría. Por eso Vegeta es el objetivo y así acabar con esos primates tan primitivos. Pero Vegeta no es Gohan, él no es tan compasivo. Aunque da igual porque al final acabará cautivo. Nuestros amigos ya han cumplido y volverán a casa. No tardarán en darse cuenta que algo extraño pasa. Baby en 2 meses infectó a casi toda la raza. Mr. Satan supo esconderse bien de esa amenaza. La despedida más triste es el sacrificio de Boo, aunque sus trozos se fusionan con el cuerpo de Up, que quiere un chocolate baby para empezar el vermú. Pero cuidado que la tableta podría ser tú. Mientras Son Goku entrena con Roca, Yoshin volverá a su cola y potencia su fuerza por fin. Y ahora sí, aguanta el tercer nivel Saiyajin. La tierra cede luna y el Ozaru ya está aquí. Un kimono, una foto, una lágrima. Un planeta despierta su ánima. Le decimos adiós a ese animal. Mucho más que una transformación mágica. El cuarto nivel está OP, ya lo ves, tanto que incluso se dejará golpear. Ni la bola mortal le hará retroceder. Viene ya lo mejor de GT sin dudar. La paliza es imponente, baby se siente impotente, pero Bulma sabe cómo hacer que su poder aumente. El Ozaru dorado revierte la situación. Ahora están tan igualados que ambos acaban KO. Goten, Trunks, Gohan, Pan cederán su ki. Y es aquí donde se decantará el combate. Baby es un cobarde y se cree que conseguirá huir, pero el Kame multiplicado por 10 lo bate. Ya ha pasado el tiempo y se ha abierto un portal. El infierno conectado con el plano terrenal. Y es que muchos enemigos conocidos volverán. Krillin morirá, los A17 se unirán. Con los golpes de los Saiyan ni se inmuta. Pan y Super Up también las pasarán canutas. Muere el Dr. Gero y el Dr. Mu lo disfruta. Pero entonces llega Goku para cerrar la disputa. Observa que el androide absorbe todos sus disparos. Mu lo paga caro, a 18 entra en acción. Pero Goku se percata de algo raro y sin reparos. Se lanza y lo atraviesa con el puño del dragón. Invocan a Shenlong pero se agrietan las bolas. Hay un dragón maligno por estrella y el primero es el de 2, que surgió de la resurrección de Bora. Lo contamina todo aunque es el débil de los bros. El siguiente es el de 5 y controla la electricidad. Nace del deseo en el que Goku ha de resucitar. Se hace más grande y se esconde en su viscosidad. La oportuna lluvia le deja en pésimo lugar. El de 6 nace de unas bragas, confiesa. Se oculta tras un rostro de princesa. Sus golpes no cesan, cortan como un filo. Maneja el aire como un titiritero sus hilos. Van a por el de 7 y este parece un topo. Nació de revivir las muertes de Vegeta Majin. Se divierte excavando y creando algún que otro terremoto. Se hace más fuerte al absorber a Pan, maldito ruin. Toca ira por la bola del abuelo Gohan. Surgió de cuando Piccolo Daimao invoca a Shenron. Parece que es el único con algo de dignidad. Este dragón iguala a los 6000 grados que hace el sol. De repente irrumpe en el combate su hermano gemelo. Su esfera es la de 3 estrellas y controla el hielo. Nace de borrar los recuerdos de la saga de Buu. Juega sucio con Goku y encima le deja ciego. Llega el dragón de una estrella de una forma cruel. Nace de resucitar a quienes mató Frieza. Sin duda de los 7 es el que tiene más poder. Goku poco puede hacer y se lleva una paliza. Trunks, Gohan y Goten dan su energía vital, pero el dragón va.
Bueno, continuaremos. Ok. ¿Qué? Ah, bueno. Está algo extraño. Ya. Pelvis. Ahora lo que continuaba era anatomía del perineo masculino y femenino en los genitales externos. No, y los genitales externos. Ya, todo este articulito creado por Lecturio. Lo he guardado dentro de la carpeta que les estoy compartiendo con las diapos y todo. Está en la parte de anatomía. Ahora pienso hacer lo mismo con el otro. ¿Cuál era? ¿De los vasos? Creo que era este o este. A ver, conclusiones de ramas ciliacas. Pero ya está. Ya le he guardado. Algo interesante del perineo que he leído, a ver. Algo interesante. Ya, esto por ejemplo, el cuerpo perineal. ¿Quiénes se insertan en este? Se inserta el músculo perineal transversal, tanto el superficial como el profundo, el bulbo esponjoso, el músculo esfinteriano anal. Esto no sé cómo es. Ya. El elevador del ano, sí. Otro interesante, esto de aquí. La fascia perineal superficial. Tiene dos capitas. Hay una capa superficial que no tiene nombre y una capita profunda de la fascia perineal superficial que se denomina fascia de Coles. ¿Ya? ¿Qué más? Ah, los triángulos. Ahí tenemos dos triángulos en el perineo. Ya sabrán, bueno, ya se recordan. El triángulo urogenital y el triángulo anal. ¿Cuál es la línea que los delimita? Es una línea que pasa por las tuberosidades isquiáticas. Ya, aquí está esto. Ya está. Traduce, ya está, traducido. A ver. Traducido. Traducido. Ya está. Esto voy a guardárselos. Ay, más rápido, no tenemos tanto tiempo. A4. Predeterminada. Ya, se los voy a guardar. Está en anatomía. Ahí está, guardadito. Listo. Ahí lo leen cuando tengan tiempo. Ahora continuemos. Perineo límites y
the inferior view of the bony pelvis. We have anterior up here and we have posterior here. We have the pubic symphysis.
Yeah.
We have the inferior pubic ramus. We have the ischiopubic ramus. We have the ischial tuberosity here. Yeah. We have running from the ischial tuberosity to the sacrum, the sacrotuberous ligament. Yes, and here we have the coccyx. And we can see that creates this diamond shape. If we do that again, we can see this diamond shape has been created. Anteriorly, we have the pubic symphysis. Laterally, we have ischial tuberosities. Posteriorly, we have the coccyx. If we connect these four dots up via the inferior pubic rami and via the sacrotuberous ligament, we can see we have this diamond shape. This diamond shape can be divided into two triangles via a transverse line at the level of the ischial tuberosities. So if we were to draw a transverse line across the ischial tuberosities, we've split this diamond into two. We've split it into a more anterior triangle. This is the anterior aspect, a more anterior triangle. And we've split it into a more posterior triangle. This is the posterior aspect. So we now have this diamond split into two. This anterior triangle is known as the urogenital triangle. And what passes through this triangle in the male is going to be urethra, and in the female, the urethra plus the vagina, the urogenital triangle, this triangle here. The triangle that's posterior to it, that just contains one aperture. It's known as the anal triangle, and this anal triangle allows the anus to pass through. So we're looking at this as if someone is laying on their back. This is the posterior aspect. Anterior is up in this direction. And we're looking through into their perineum. With their external genitalia removed, we can see the pubic symphysis, we can see the coccyx, and we can divide this diamond shape into two triangles. Urogenital triangle, anal triangle. Within these triangles, we'll have those apertures for the urethra, the vagina, and the anus. So now I just want to concentrate on the perineal membrane.
Yeah.
And the perineal membrane is just associated with the urogenital triangle.
Urogenital. Ahí se encuentra.
Just associated with the urogenital triangle. And that's what we can see here. If we look at this view, this anterior view of the pubic bone within the pelvis, this is superior up here, this is inferior now. We can see the ischial tuberosities, we can see the pubic symphysis, and we can see the inferior pubic ramus. So here, if we do the transverse line again, we can see we've created this triangle, which is the urogenital triangle. And we can see that just filling this urogenital triangle, just occupying the urogenital triangle, is a shelf-like structure, a shelf-like thin membrane known as the perineal membrane. We can see that in this perineal membrane, there's a couple of holes. In the female is a good one to use an example because there's two holes. We can see we have a hole for the urethra. We can see we have a hole for the vagina. So these structures are passing through this perineal membrane at the level of the urogenital triangle. We can see surrounding the urethra is the external urethral sphincter. And we'll explore other muscles in this area as we go on. But this perineal membrane is just located within the urogenital triangle. If we were to explore some other muscles, then if we can appreciate that we've got the perineal membrane here, and that is just a shelf that's been put in the urogenital triangle. So if we were to do a transverse section through, we could see the perineal membrane here, and then we'd have the urethra passing through it.
Yeah.
So we'd have the perineal membrane here, attaching to the ischial tuberosities, here. And then we've got this perineal membrane that's just running across from ischial tuberosity to ischial tuberosity. Here, if we could imagine the section has been taken along here. And here we can see the free edge of the perineal membrane where it stops. Now associated with this posterior border, there is going to be two muscles. Deep and superficial transverse perineal muscle. Along this posterior border, which we can imagine is here, this posterior border, there's going to be a deep and a superficial transverse perineal muscle layer. Here we can see the deep transverse perineal muscle, and here we can see the superficial transverse perineal muscle. And these lie along the posterior border of the perineal membrane, running from ischial tuberosity to ischial tuberosity. Now, where they converge in the midline here, we find we have this fibromuscular structure, this fibrous mass, and that is known as the perineal body. The perineal body. And the perineal body lies directly posterior to the vagina, along the posterior border of the perineal membrane. It's in the midline, and our perineal muscles converge into it. It's known as the perineal body. More posteriorly, we then find the anus. Located posterior to the vagina, or the bulb of the penis if we are in the male, we then would find the anus and the anal canal. And the perineal body is positioned between them.
Ya. Preguntitas. ¿Dónde se encuentra el perineo en relación con la cavidad pélvica? El perineo está por debajo, está inferior a la cavidad pélvica, o si no, está en un plano superficial a la cavidad pélvica. Ya. ¿Qué hito forma el límite anterior del perineo? La sínfisis púbica. Ya. ¿Qué forma el límite lateral de la fosa analisquiática? Hostia, un rato. Límite lateral de la fosa analisquiática. Límite lateral de la fosa analisquiática. El obturado interno, la fascia del obturado interno, por ahí baja, ¿no? Que está cerca del, ¿cómo se llama? Del agujero ciático menor, no foramen ciático menor. El elevador del ano no forma la piel no forma un límite lateral. El esfínter anal externo no forma un límite. El obturado interno. A ver. Ya. El aspecto inferior del canal anal recibe sangre arterial a través de ¿qué arteria? ¿Cómo? Aspecto inferior. Está mal traducido esto. La cara inferior debe ser. La parte inferior del canal anal recibe sangre arterial a través de ¿qué arteria? Ya, rectal inferior será pues. Y esta rectal inferior proviene de la pudenda. No me recuerdo. A ver, ¿qué anota pillo? Sí, de la pudenda interna. Ya recuerdo. Por el foramen menor, foramen ciático menor, baja el músculo pudendo interno, ¿cómo se llama? Obturado interno, y también el van de la pudenda. La arteria, vena y nervio de la pudenda. Ya, rectal inferior. A ver, era rectal inferior, rectal superior por aquí arriba, rectal medio aquí. A otros rectales también se les conoce como hemorroidales, ¿verdad? A ver. Ya, sí está bien esto ya. Rectal inferior, rama de la pudenda. Ya. Siguiente. Rápido, pasa el tiempo. Ya tenemos que acabar lo más rápido posible. Bolsas perineales.
So now let's turn to the perineal pouches. The perineal pouches are found within the urogenital triangle.
Yeah.
And within the urogenital triangle, we have the perineal membrane. And that separates the perineum into these deep and superficial perineal pouches.
Yeah.
If we look at the deep perineal pouch, that is bounded inferiorly by the perineal membrane, and superiorly, it contains the anterior recess of the ischioanal fossa. Ultimately, most superiorly, we'd have the levator ani muscles. It contains the deep perineal pouch, so everything that is superior to the perineal membrane.
Yeah.
It contains the deep transverse perineal muscles,
Yeah.
contains the external urethral sphincter,
Yeah.
contains the intermediate part of the urethra in the male. Also in the male, it contains the bulbourethral glands, and as we'll see, it contains some important blood vessels and nerves. The superficial perineal pouch is everything that's going to be superficial to the perineal membrane. Everything that is below the perineal membrane, inferior to the perineal membrane. And ultimately, this is going to be bound by subcutaneous tissue.
Yeah.
It's going to contain, in the male or female, the root of the penis and the clitoris.
Yeah.
It's going to contain urethra, contain the superficial transverse perineal muscles, superficial to the perineal membrane,
Yeah.
contain vessels and nerves, and in the female it will contain the greater vestibular gland.
Ya, perfecto. Preguntas. ¿Qué estructura forma el límite superior de la bolsa perineal profunda? Profunda. A ver. Este es el piso pélvico, tenemos la membrana perineal y tenemos la piel, si no me equivoco. Son 3 cositas. Ahora el profundo quedaría aquí. Bolsa perineal profundo y aquí la bolsa perineal superficial. Me está diciendo cuál es el límite superior de la bolsa perineal profunda. Y es el diafragma pélvico o piso pélvico. A ver qué dice aquí. Bueno. Fascia superior del diafragma urogenital. ¿Ya? Aquí cosa hay, a ver. Ya está bien. ¿Qué estructura no es parte de la bolsa perineal superficial? Bolsa perineal superficial. Órganos sexuales externos están en esto. A ver qué cosa hay. La raíz del clítoris, glándulas vestibulares mayores, ya, músculos superficiales, ya. Raíz del pene, glándula bulbo-uretrales. Esta bulbo-uretrales creo que en los varones esto se encuentra en la bolsa perineal profunda. Sí, este es. Raíz del clítoris ya es por fuera, raíz del pene también por fuera. A ver. Sí. Está en las mismas diapos. Ok, siguiente. Falta 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 por 3, 15. ¿Cuánto dura cada uno? No quiero extender esto más. Va a tardar un poco más de tiempo, ¿verdad?
So now let's have a look at the female. The deep and superficial pouches within the female. And we can see these on this diagram here. We can see we have the perineal membrane over on this side. We can see it here. And we can see the perineal membrane on this side. What we can see if we start with the superficial perineal pouch, this is the superior aspect with pubic symphysis, and we'd have inferior down here. Ischial tuberosities, so we've got the posterior border of the perineal membrane here. We can see that in the superficial perineal pouch of the female, we have similar structures. We have the ischio-cavernosus muscle, and that ischio-cavernosus muscle is going to be covering the crus of, instead of the corpus cavernosa, but the crus of the clitoris. And that is very similar in orientation to the corpus cavernosum in the male. And again, it's covered by the ischio-cavernosus muscle. And these are coming up again from the ischiopubic ramus in this direction to unite in the midline. And here we find the corpus cavernosum of the clitoris. We can see we have the perineal membrane where these are attached. And in the midline, we have in the female the vagina, which opens up into the vestibule. Obviously in the male, without the vagina, this is closed. We don't have an opening. But in the female, for the vagina, we have this opening. And it's flanked on either side by the bulb of the vestibule. And again, this is erectile tissue. The bulb of the vestibule flanks the opening to the vagina, flanks the vaginal orifice here. We can see more anteriorly, we have the external urethral orifice here. So we can see urethral orifice. We can see the opening for the vagina, and then we can see the anus. But covering the bulb of the vestibule, which flanks the lateral aspect of the opening to the vagina, we find we have bulbospongiosus muscle. So analogous structures from both the male and the female. If we were to take these components of the superficial perineal pouch away, we'd then be left with the perineal membrane, and then we can see the opening for the vagina here, and then we can see the female urethra. And surrounding it, we've got the external urethral sphincter. If we were to see the deep perineal pouch, then like we did in the male previously, we'd have to pull this membrane away. Now, located within the deep perineal pouch within the female, we have our urethra, we have the external urethral sphincter. We have deep transverse perineal muscles, and we have parts of the vagina. And then in the superficial perineal pouch, like I've just explained, we still have the urethra. It's passing all the way out to the external environment. We now have the superficial transverse perineal muscle. We have the root of the clitoris, just like in the male we had the root of the penis. And here we can see we have two crura covered by the ischiocavernosus.
Ya, esto antes de que se me pierdan esta partecita. Ya, el clítoris es toda esta estructura, ¿vale? Tiene sus brazos, tiene su cuerpo. ¿Y qué más tiene esta cosa? Y un cuerpo cavernoso aquí arribita. Y obviamente el clítoris. Ya. Según lo que tengo entendido, todo esto de aquí es el... ¿Cómo era esta cosa? Ya. ¿Este de aquí o es esto de aquí? Ah, rayos, no me recuerdo. A ver. Imagen. 3D, ¿dónde está? 3D. Modelo 3D. Oh, y es 21. Rápido avanza el tiempo. Carga. Ya, este de aquí, ¿cómo se llama esta cosita? Ya, este de aquí es el músculo isquiocavernoso. Este músculo isquiocavernoso, está por debajo de lo que se conoce, bueno, aquí en el video se conoce como cruz del clítoris. Pero esto de aquí es... bueno, el clítoris tiene su raíz, su cuerpo, y estos dos fusionados, aquí dice, y estos dos fusionados conforman el cuerpo cavernoso del clítoris. Y terminan en el mismo clítoris. Ya. Bueno, eso nada más quería comentarles. Sí, eso nada más. Ya, ahora terminamos el video y luego ya almorzar.
Penosus muscle, and then these go on to form the clitoris. We have the bulb of the vestibule that's flanking the vagina. These are covered by bulbospongiosus muscle. In the female and within the superficial perineal pouch, we also have the greater vestibular glands, and these help to lubricate the vagina. We can see these are located in the superficial perineal pouch. So here we can see a view of the female perineum if we were looking at it externally. These are very similar views. So we have the superior aspect up here, the pubic symphysis would be deep to the mons pubis here, and here we've got the more posterior aspect here. And we can see in these two views that we have the anal opening here, we have the anal opening here. We can see the anal opening. We'd have the coccyx background here, just like we can see the coccyx here. And then more anteriorly, we can see we have the labia major, more laterally. Then we have the labia minor, and then we have the opening for the urethra and the opening for the vagina. And this region will be the vestibule. If we take away this skin, we can see where we have the glans clitoris here, would be the glans clitoris around about here in this diagram. Here we have the opening for the urethra, and here we have the opening for the vagina. And here we can see the bulbospongiosus muscle covering the bulb of the vestibule. To find the bulb of the vestibule, you'll have to clear away this fatty labia, and if you dig down deep, you should be able to find it.
Yeah.
Another view of the female perineum here, and we can see that similar to the male picture we showed, we've had a section, a coronal section down through the pelvis. Again, we can see levator ani muscles, we can see them here. We can see the vagina, and then we can see the uterus here. We can see the bladder, which is anterior, remember, to the uterus and to the vagina. And here we have the urethra, and that is positioned anterior to the vagina, which we can see here. Now, flanking either side of the vagina, we can see we have bulbospongiosus muscle, and we have the bulb of the vestibule. And these are hanging from the perineal membrane. And once again, above the perineal membrane, we can see the deep perineal space. We can see it here, containing the deep perineal transverse muscle. And then superficial to the perineal muscle, perineal membrane, we can see the superficial perineal space. We can see it here, containing those erectile tissues. We can also see we've got the greater vestibular gland here as well. So a similar diagram to what we saw in the male, in trying to explore the boundaries of the perineum.
Ya, creo que con eso es suficiente. Nos falta 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, todavía nos falta. Ay. Queremos. ¿Qué músculo rodea el bulbo del vestíbulo en las mujeres? El isquio cavernoso. O el bulbo esponjoso. ¿Cómo era eso? Isquio cavernoso. Isquio está en... Ya, eso no es. Eso no. Este de aquí rodea a la cruz del clítoris o a la raíz del clítoris. Ya, el bulbo esponjoso. Sí, el bulbo esponjoso rodea el vestíbulo de la mujer. Es como un anillito que se contrae o se dilata. Ya, ya. ¿Qué estructura está presente en la bolsa perineal superficial y en la bolsa perineal profunda? En ambos. Glándulas vestibulares mayores, no, está afuera. Bueno, está en la superficial. Isquio cavernoso también afuera. Bulbo esponjoso afuera. Raíz del clítoris afuera. O también denominado cruz del clítoris. Ya. Uretra. Ya, sí, la uretra pasa por ambos. Está bien. Ya. Bueno, muchachos, creo que aquí nos quedamos. Ay, no quería terminar esto antes de comer. Ya sé. Vayan a descansar. Si es que van a ver esto después, pongan pausa aquí y luego hacen sus cosas, luego regresan. Ya. Pero si es terco. Ya pues, continuamos. Ya. Continuaremos. Tenemos que acabar esto. Tenemos que acabar. Ya, falta poco. Es la última ronda.
So what's the neurovasculature of the perineum? What's the neurovasculature of the perineum? Well, we've looked at that because we saw the internal pudendal artery sweeping around in this direction, a branch coming from the internal iliac artery. It's sweeping around. And this, as we saw, gave rise to the inferior rectal artery, supplies the anus and the rectum. It goes on to give a whole series of blood vessels that supply the perineum. Within it, we have the internal pudendal artery. We also have the pudendal nerve. I'm not going to mention the veins, but the veins will follow a similar course to that of the artery. So the internal pudendal artery is going to give rise to the inferior rectal arteries that go to supply the anal canal. It's going to give perineal branch that goes to supply structures in the perineum. And this will branch off to the bulb of the penis or the vestibule of the vagina, the bulb of the vestibule. It'll also give rise to the deep arteries of either the penis or the clitoris, and these supply the erectile tissues. And it will give rise to an artery, the dorsal artery again of the penis or clitoris, that goes to the skin and also the erectile tissues. Within this pudendal canal, we also find the pudendal nerve, originating from spinal cord segments S2, 3, and 4. We saw the inferior rectal nerve passing to the external anal sphincter for somatic control. We have deep perineal nerves that supply the muscles within the perineal pouches, and we also have a superficial perineal nerve, supply the skin of the scrotum, and a dorsal nerve. This supplies the skin of the penis and the clitoris. The branching pattern of the internal pudendal nerve and artery in the perineum is quite complicated, as can be seen in this diagram. We'll just try and follow some of these arteries through in the male and female and see where we end up, essentially. But we've got the internal pudendal artery, which is running here. We can see it giving rise to the artery and the nerve that goes to supply the external anal sphincter. These are running here. These running through your ischial fossa are going to be your inferior rectal and your inferior rectal artery and inferior rectal nerve. The internal pudendal artery then carries on, and it carries on as the perineal artery, and the perineal artery then carries on running as it enters into the perineum. It gives branches that go to the bulb of the penis. It gives branches that go to the external anal sphincter. And we can see the perineal artery carrying on going in this direction. We can see it's giving rise to some posterior scrotal arteries that run up here. It's also giving rise to the dorsal nerve of the penis. We can see a branch coming off in this direction here that's running to supply the dorsal aspect of the artery. It'll also give rise to a deep artery, and that deep artery will run through corpus cavernosum, supplying the blood that goes into this erectile tissue for engorgement. So we can see this is a particularly complicated diagram with the blood vessels passing into the perineum. The nerves are going to follow, so we can pick out the dorsal nerve of the penis. That's going to run along the dorsal surface of the penis. If we look here at the female, then we have very similar structures. Again, we can see the internal pudendal artery running around in here, giving rise to the inferior rectal artery running around. This internal pudendal artery will then carry on. It will give rise to some posterior labial branches. It will then give rise, as we can see here, the dorsal artery of the clitoris. This is going to supply the clitoris, just like the dorsal artery of the penis supplied the penis. We can see we have numerous veins that are going to be taking venous blood in the opposite direction, and in amongst here we have various nerves, like the dorsal nerve of the clitoris that passes through, and we have the posterior scrotal nerves that are running through this region as well. But you can see that this is a very complicated region, the neurovasculature of the perineum, with numerous structures passing forwards into it to ultimately supply the erectile tissues and to supply the skin of the perineal pouches.
Ok, preguntas. ¿De qué vaso se origina la arteria escrotal anterior? Pudenda interna. Escrotal anterior. Escrotal anterior. No. Escrotal anterior. Escrotal anterior. No. De la pudenda interna sale la perineal. De la perineal puede surgir el escrotal posterior. Puede. Pero el escrotal posterior también puede salir de la arteria femoral. Y el escrotal anterior no. ¿Dónde es escrotal anterior? Arteria pudenda externa. Ya. Ya, voy a repasar esto. No me recuerdo muy bien. Estoy un poquito bolsita. ¿Qué nervio inerva la piel del escroto? Ya pues, ya dije, escrotal posterior. ¿Qué vaso suministra sangre a la piel del clítoris? Sangre a la piel del clítoris, la dorsal del clítoris. La dorsal del clítoris, la piel, ya. El último. Conclusiones. ¿Qué más tengo aquí? ¿Qué cosa he abierto pues yo aquí? No manches la pared. Sí, el piso pélvico. Ok, pues aquí en piso pélvico. A ver, puedo adelantar poquito a poquito. Porque en serio tengo hambre también ya. Componentes de la pelvis, 3 huesos que constituyen la pelvis, ya se sabe. Ilion isquion pubis. Ah, estos son otras cosas ya, perfecto. Entonces este es el último. Ya, chévere. Ya.
So in conclusion, we've looked at the divisions of the perineum, the urogenital triangle and the anal triangle. We've looked at the boundaries of the ischoanal fossa, levator ani, external anal sphincter, obturator internus fascia. And we've looked at the pudendal canal, an inferior rectal neurovascular bundle that ran through the ischoanal fossa. We've looked at the perineal pouches, both in the male and the female, the deep and the superficial pouches, and looked at the differences between the male and female. And then finally, we briefly looked at the neurovasculature of the perineum, looking at the pudendal nerve branches and looking at the branches coming away from the pudendal artery.
Bueno, muchachos, eso es todo por hoy. Ya no aguanto más. Bueno, muchachos, se me cuidan. A ver, pues, si es que nos reunimos en la noche, a la 1 de la noche, 1 de la mañana, porque eso del internet es un poquito más ligero. Y podemos hacer una videollamada. ¿Ya?